Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to The Truth. I'm your host, the one you love the most, Nile Hesson, back with a brand new episode here in The Truth. Back once again with my boy AJ Ponciano. AJ, how are you doing here today?
I'm doing great now. How about yourself?
I'm doing great as well. We have basically gotten to the finish point of our fantasy football talk before the season starts, as we're going to be doing our final quarterback rankings here today. We got running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends to follow. So, got our final rankings there. We got a couple more mock drafts and a couple more shows. Before you know it, football is going to be here. We recently just finished the first week of the NFL preseason, got 2 weeks left, got the regular season like 20 some days away. So, it's exciting times here. A lot of people, obviously, most people are going to be drafting this fantasy or this month, their fantasy football team. So a lot of things to be excited about. We've talked basically about everybody that we have on our list. We're going to kind of give you guys our top seven and why we think they're going to be our top seven. If you guys would like the full fantasy football rankings, click the link in the description. You can subscribe to The Truth for $2.99 a month, and you'll be able to get those full rankings in depth there. So without further ado, AJ, go ahead and give me your seventh best quarterback this season.
Yeah, so at number seven, I have Kyler Murray. I think a lot of people forget about Kyler Murray. Like his first 3 years, he was a Pro Bowl type of player. His his second, third year, sorry, he's Pro Bowl. Rookie of the year is his rookie year. But I think a lot of people forget about him because of the injury. I mean, he tore up his knee week 11 last year, and then come back, or 2 years ago, and then come back until week 8 or week 11. So yeah, basically a full calendar year uh, on the football schedule. And just missed a lot of time. And now he finally has a true number one weapon. I know DeAndre Hopkins was, but they kind of didn't seem like they were on the same page for a lot of those games. And also, with a lot of time missed, they didn't really get a good connection there. But he has Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, one of the top wide receiver prospects we've seen in a while there. Trey McBride's finally stepping into form. They're going to have a good running back there between a running back room there between Trey Benson and James Conner, and the offensive line has gotten much better since last time Kyler played with I believe it's Parrish Johnson out of Ohio State is over there at left tackle, and they just made a lot of upgrades there. One of the big things also is his sack numbers have gone down every year. It seems like his rookie year he had 48 sacks, which led the NFL. Just last year, I know he only played in 8 games, but only had 18 sacks there last season, and also his rushing upside is up there as one of the best. I think it was kind of slowed down because of the injury last year. They didn't rush as much, but he still was able to show his mobility in the pocket. And I think with another full 6 months, 7 months now, that he's going to be able to have more recovery and be able to have more trust with his with having his legs underneath him. I think he'll be able to excel in that.
Yeah, so my number seven is actually going to be a little bit of a surprise to some people, and it's going to be Patrick Mahomes. Now, obviously, I think Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL, but I don't think he's the best fantasy quarterback in the NFL. I mean, we see quarterbacks or guys in particular, especially in today's day and age with a lot of rushing, actually be the best fantasy quarterbacks, even though they might not be the most talented. If I'm not mistaken, Patrick Mahomes finished 10th last year on average, about 17.52 points per game. He is the best quarterback in football, just finished 10th just because of his rushing and stats and all that stuff. I mean, for a Patrick Mahomes type season, I didn't think it was that spectacular. I mean, he had the 4,100 yards, but 27 touchdowns and 14 interceptions, carried the ball 75 times for 339 yards and zero touchdowns. So that's one of the things with Patrick Mahomes. You're going to get a great, talented guy in Patrick Mahomes, and he's getting drafted way higher than I think people should be drafting him. I think he a lot of times is the number two, even one, or even three quarterback taken off the board. And he's a good quarterback. He's the best quarterback in the league, in my opinion, talent wise. But fantasy wise, I still got to put him inside the top 10. I got to put him at seven. But guy that's drafted at 28 ADP right now, I think he's drafted way too high. And, he's going to be good, but he's not going to be top three quarterback worthy like some of the other guys that we'll mention a little bit later. Okay, number six.
Or six, I have CJ Stroud. One of the things about the Texans now is they have all the weapons in the world for him. Joe Mixon, finally a true RB1 there, who's a good receiving back. Stephon Diggs obviously comes over, and that really opens up a wide receiver room, especially with Tank Dell. I mean, his expectations coming into last season weren't that high. Same with Nico Collins, and he was able to make those guys look like all pro or Pro Bowl type wide receivers there. Now you add Stephon Diggs into that wide receiver room. He just has all the weapons you can ask for. His big thing is just don't turn the ball over, and he didn't really do that last year. Only 5 interceptions, 4,100 yards, 23 touchdowns through the air. He also had 3 rushing touchdowns. The reason I have a little bit further down or further down the top 10, right there, just outside the top five, is because there isn't much rushing potential, and that's one of the big things with a lot of the quarterbacks now, especially for fantasy, is how much they're able to provide on the ground. And you're not really gonna get that CJ Stroud now, especially having Joe Mixon there. A lot of those run plays are not going to be dialed up for Stroud at all. It's just be going to Mixon. But I like his weapons. He got an upgrade there, even though I'm not a big Diggs fan, and he's been rumored as a little bit of a diva throughout his career. It's just one of those things that, as a football player, he's super talented. And then that wide receiver room just got so much better. And another year with D'Amico Ryan's there, another year with that system taking a step forward potentially. If not, I mean, Stroud finished as QB number 9 last year when they just had he's the second overall pick to the Texans. So he was able to take that big of a step forward his rookie year and first year of that system, and now you add an all pro, all type wide receiver and Diggs into that offense and a Pro Bowl type running back in Joe Mixon. I think that he just has all the weapons that he could ask for.
Yeah, so for me, my number six is going to be Joe Burrow. Look, I'm a big Joe Burrow fan. I know he's coming off of an injury-riddled season, but he's got a new haircut. He looks fire, got a new look to him. That's always great for fantasy owners. But in reality, Joe Burrow is a great player. I'm a huge Joe Burrow fan. I've always been a huge Joe Burrow fan. If he can get back to that 2021, 2022 season where he had like 34 touchdowns to like 13 interceptions, he's going to have great fantasy production. I know there's some question marks on that Bengals offense with T. Higgins. At the moment, T. Higgins hasn't gotten moved, but that could always change either before the season starts or even after the season starts, which could alter Joe Burrow. But you bring in Eric All, my guy out of Iowa, partially my guy. He was only there for a year. You still got Jamar Chase, who's regarded as one of the top receivers in fantasy. So there's still going to be a lot of yards production. Not to mention you got Zach Moss and Chase Brown out of the backfield. I think it's a win-win situation. Joe Burrow is like the epitome of a pass first quarterback with a little bit of rushing capabilities. Will pick up a couple rushing touchdowns, a couple hundred rushing yards, and just overall be a consistent guy week in and week out. That's why I have him slated at my number six position. Even with the injury concerns, I mean, you can never really predict injury. So that aside, I have him as my sixth best fantasy quarterback this year, with potential to be in the running for MVP, depending on how he can kind of filter in with his offense. Okay, number five.
At 5, I have Jalen Hurts. He finished as the QB2 last year, and that's mainly because of the tush push and all the touchdowns he got there on the rushing side. Now, he still is going to add that rushing value. Throughout his career, he's been right around 700 yards. Last year, 15 touchdowns, which is a lot, which is more than he's had the last couple of years, 13 and 10. I still think he can give you between 7 to 10 touchdowns there on the ground, with right around that 600, 700 yard mark, but Saquon's going to take away a lot of that production on the outfield, having a true RB1. And through the air, I mean, he threw a lot of touchdowns last year in comparison to other years. Last year, 15. Years before that, 6 and 9, and also 4 his rookie year. But touchdowns have been going up. He's going to probably stay right around that 20 to 25 range in the touchdown department. He's never cracked 4,000 yards, which there's a chance he does do that this year with Devonta Smith and AJ Brown, just because he doesn't need to run the ball as much. Offensive line's still solid. I know they lose Kelsey there at the center position, so that's going to be a big hole to fill. But they still got a good amount of the offensive line still intact, which should be fine. But again, he's gonna. I don't think he's gonna finish as a QB2. I don't think he's gonna give you 15 rushing touchdowns. Uh, I think if he was able to bring those interceptions down and stay right around that 20-25 range on on passing touchdowns, give you 7 to 10 rushing touchdowns, he could finish as a top 5 guy. I'm just not a big believer in this offense for Hurts, just because there's so many weapons that you can give the ball to. Saquon on the ground is obviously going to take many of those pass attempts away, potentially a lot of those rush attempts. And yeah, I know you have Brown and I'm blanking on his name. You got the two wide
Devontae
receivers,
Smith.
yeah, Devonta Smith, there, but I don't know. I mean, they've been really good every year. There's got to be a down year eventually. I think Hurts is still good enough to have a top 10 finish, but there's a chance that he could just slip through the cracks, especially with some of these other guys coming back from injury.
Yeah, so for me, my number five is going to be Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott last year finished as the number four fantasy quarterback with an average of 19.86 points per game. I'm really excited to see what Dak's going to do. Again, Dak kind of reminds me of Joe Burrow in the fact that, Dak doesn't move anymore ever since he had that devastating leg injury, it seems like, but he's going to pass the ball a lot. I know obviously there's some question marks with CD Lamb. I don't know if you guys saw on Twitter when Jerry Jones was asked about extending CD Lamb, and he kind of gave a half-hearted answer, and then CD Lamb literally tweets "lol." So that's not a good start for Cowboys fans. But honestly, CD Lamb, in my opinion, is like the only guy that they have on that team as far as production or anyone that's going to get any decency amount of targets or even receptions or anything like that. This is a guy that could get upwards of 2,000 just because he's really the only option there. Yeah, Brandon Cooks comes back. You have Jake Ferguson. That's really it. So Dak Prescott's going to throw the ball a lot. Dak Prescott has had a lot of success in the past. Dak Prescott's one of those guys that seems to be, as long as he stays healthy, he's one of those guys that's among the top of quarterbacks and a guy that a lot of people just don't really draft. I mean, he's averaged 74th ADP right now. Last season, the 4,500 yards, 36 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. I'm taking that any day of the week, especially with a quarterback that's drafted so late that Dak Prescott is. Okay, number four.
At number four, I have a little more of an interesting one, and it's more of just a potential play. It's Anthony Richardson. I know he was injured last year. He had the shoulder injury, but he played in 4 games. But even then, you could put an asterisk there. He was out pretty early in that fourth game with that injury. And I want to say week 2 or week 3, he also had an injury where he missed part of the third quarter and the entire fourth quarter where he was taken out. In that time, I mean, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception through the air, 555 or 577 yards there. Also on the rushing side, he had only 25 rush attempts those 4 games, but 135 yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. I mean, he has also gained weight apparently this offseason, like good weight. Like I want to say it's like 15, 20 pounds is what they're saying that he's gained. I mean, he's just a massive human being at the quarterback position. And I think once they get to the goal line, it's going to be either a handoff to Jonathan Taylor or just let Anthony Richardson go for it. I mean, I feel like he's gonna have a Cam Newton type of, I won't say MVP year, but like that year right before his MVP year, where it's like he was in the discussion of like, hey, look at this guy. I mean, he's kind of doing it all. He can has a cannon for an arm, but he can also go run it 65 yards and go outrun that safety down the sideline. I think that's the type of season we potentially see Richardson have. I mean, this is really just a potential play. It's mainly the rushing upside you could see. I mean, that's what, again, I mentioned before, for quarterbacks in fantasy, you need that rushing upside if you're going to go for a quarterback. If not, you want a pocket passer who's not going to turn the ball over. Those are basically the two ends of the spectrum that you have to stay at for fantasy quarterbacks. And Richardson has some of the highest potential, in my opinion, to be able to be a guy to go throw that 60-yard touchdown, but also go rush a 60-yard touchdown in the same game.
Yeah, so for my number four, I got Kyler Murray. I know you talked about him, I believe, at number seven. I like Kyler Murray a lot this year. I mean, he showed a lot of positives coming back from injury last year, and that Cardinals offense is vastly improved. You have Marvin Harrison Jr., the big time rookie. You also have Trey McBride, who's going to probably have an emergence type season. So looking at the Arizona Cardinals as a whole, it's a lot better situation for Kyler Murray. And I feel like Kyler Murray has also had pretty decent situations in the past. I will be honest though, other than Marvin Harrison and Trey McBride, that's really it. Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch fill out the rest of the wide receivers. But looking at Kyler Murray as a whole, this is strictly a running upside potential. I mean, Kyler Murray is a guy that was at times number one quarterback in fantasy because he would have 100 rushing yards a game. He's just a freak like that. I think there were some hesitancies with Kyler Murray last year, and respectively so, because he did have that injury that he's been dealing with for a period of time. I believe it was a torn ACL or Achilles, one of the two. But that's always going to get a quarterback, especially a running quarterback, some hesitancy. But now that those have kind of gone away, the growing pains have kind of gone away from that injury. He's poised for a really big season, and I think he's one of those guys that not many people are talking about. I mean, he's drafted lower than guys like Dak Prescott, obviously Patrick Mahomes, drafted at the about 91 ADP. That's a guy that you can get in your seventh, eighth round that could be a number one quarterback as a whole by the end of the fantasy season. So I think the rushing upside is definitely there. I think the passing upside is there as well. And all in all, it's a great situation for Kyler Murray, especially with the ADP that he's at currently. All right, your number three.
At number 3, this is where I have Patrick Mahomes, and it's mainly the rushing upside or downside. There isn't really much there. He'll give you some rushing touchdowns every year. Last year he didn't have any, which was kind of surprising. He's usually floats around between 2 to 4. I mean, pretty consistently in the twos. 2 years ago had 4. He's going to give you 300 to 400 rushing yards, so nothing special there. Just kind of a little cherry on top. But the reason why he drops down is because his efficiency last year just wasn't that good. And you can chalk that up to Travis Kelce being a big part of it, him having that really slow start last year. I mean, he had Patrick Mahomes his worst year. This would probably be his second worst year of his NFL career. His second worst year, or his first worst year, was the year after he won MVP, where he threw 50 touchdowns, and also won his first MVP. Kind of a hangover year, it felt like. But last year, 14 interceptions, a career high there. I don't expect him to have 14 interceptions again, especially with his weapons that he does have. He also has second lowest passing touchdowns at 27. His lowest is 26. I mean, he just wasn't that efficient last year, and that was the big thing. His yards per game were down. His QBR was way down. It was actually the lowest of his entire career. Was this past year's QBR. Yards per game were down. I mean, he just has so many more weapons now, or he should have better weapons now. Like Hollywood Brown, more of that another deep threat guy with speed. Xavier Worthy, the fastest guy in the NFL combine history. You still have Rashee Rice. You're going to miss him for a couple games. You're still going to have Travis Kelce there. I just think he has a lot of weapons, and still Mahomes. I mean, he's still going to finish as probably a top 5, top 6 quarterback every year. I know last year he finished a little bit lower because of the interceptions being a big part there. But I expect a bounce back year. I think everyone's standards had him very low, and I wouldn't say he should be drafted where he's being drafted, but I could see him finishing as that QB1. I mean, it's Patrick Mahomes. Every year, there's a chance of that. And also, a little bit of a potential thing is CD maybe going to the Chiefs. I don't know if you saw the thing
I
with
did see
Hollywood
that.
Brown and
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
Hollywood Brown and changed his Twitter background of him and CD at Oklahoma, just chilling, like walking into the tunnel. And then, like 5 minutes later, CD changed his background to him and Hollywood Brown, just another same type of photo, but from like a different game. So I don't know if that's gonna be a thing or not, but if it is, I mean that's one of the best wide receivers in the NFL going to Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, you never know, honestly, especially with the recent developments from Jerry Jones and the Cowboys as a whole. For my number three, I'm going to go with the guy that you touched on that you thought you were maybe taking too much of a risk on. I'm going with Anthony Richardson at number three. This is purely non-injury based. I don't when I make my rankings, you can't predict injuries. Like in my opinion, unless it's a guy that 5, 6 years in a row has like had torn ACLs, guys like J.K. Dobbins, you can't predict injuries. I mean, yeah, does Anthony Richardson seem more susceptible to them? Of course, but everyone's susceptible to injuries, especially in today's day and age. You talked about the fact that he put on a lot of great weight. He looks a lot bigger, maybe a modern day Cam Newton, even though Cam Newton wasn't too long ago. He's got a lot of the same similarities. And the biggest thing with Richardson in those first 4 games that he played in is he was off to a tremendous start. As far as those first 4 games are concerned, the 577 passing yards, 3 touchdowns to 1 interception, with 136 rushing yards to 4 touchdowns, which is really what kind of stuck out the page to me. Obviously, the rushing upside is there. I mean, this could be Josh Allen type rushing touchdown numbers. And on top of that, the passing game does improve, and that passing game looks really good. Got Michael Pittman, who I think is poised for a big year. Same with Josh Downs. A.D. Mitchell, could have a good year as a rookie. Alec Pierce, forget about him. So there's a lot of great young wide receivers. I don't want to say could be similar to the Green Bay Packers as far as these younger receivers or some receivers that kind of just break out in the scene for kind of randomly. I could see similarities with that, but the biggest thing obviously with the Colts is making sure that he's able to stay healthy. They do have Joe Flacco, if you guys did not know, as their backup quarterback. So we obviously saw what Flacco did last year at the Browns. Hopefully that doesn't happen with Richardson at the quarterback position, but you never really know. So really excited to see what he's going to be able to do. And like I said, he's a top 3 quarterback on my list for a reason. Okay, your number 2.
At number 2, sort of have Josh Allen. Allen's rushing upside is up there as some of the best. Last year, 15 rushing touchdowns, which was great. He's going to give you, I don't think he'll get you 15 again, but definitely like 10 to 12 is a good mark I see there. His rushing yards were down. His previous 2 seasons before last year in the 700s, actually 763 and 762. Last year, only 524 in comparison, but more rushing touchdowns. Through the air, had a career high in interceptions at 18. I don't expect him to throw another 18 interceptions. Probably closer to where he was before, around that 14 range. But also, passing touchdowns were down. He was only at 29. His previous 3 years before that, 37, 36, and 35. I expect him to get back to that mid-30s mark with a little bit less touchdowns. 4,300 yards. I get it, he doesn't have Diggs, so there's going to be question marks there, but I think Kincaid's going to take a huge step forward. Keon Coleman should be good there. Curtis Samuel, I think someone who's going to be really good, really underrated in that offense that people aren't going to talk about. You still have James Cook, who's a great receiving option out of the backfield. I think that this team's also just going to be playing from behind a lot, so Josh Allen's going to have to create either through the air or with his legs. Any which way he does it, he's going to be one of the main factors of them getting into the end zone. Even if it's him just trying to force it in, rushing the ball on all four attempts if they go for it on fourth down. I think everything has to run through Josh Allen. They can't really rely on James Cook because James Cook's really good because of Josh Allen and the wide receivers there. I mean, there's no alpha wide receiver, so you kind of just have to pick and choose your moments on which one's going to be the best. And it could be one guy having one huge game, or it could be everyone just getting the ball and him having just spread it around some games. But it's one of those things that he has to pick up his matchups. He's got to be able to just limit his turnovers, and if he does that, he's shown that he can be one of the best fantasy options at quarterback. I mean, last year I believe he did finish as QB1.
So for me, my number two is going to be Lamar Jackson. Now, I've always been a big Lamar Jackson fan. He was the MVP last season. I think it's really a lot of people are saying consensus Lamar and Josh Allen won too, depending on where you put them. I really like Lamar though. Obviously, we saw what he did. His first years in the NFL, already winning his second MVP last season. I'm just going to briefly go over the stats, just because obviously he won MVP. But 3,600 yards, 24-7 touchdown to interception, 821 yards and 5 touchdowns. I mean, that's really good for a fantasy quarterback. That's 80 points just rushing the football. And those are yards. We're not even talking about the touchdowns that came from that. So obviously a great season. Why wouldn't I put him at number one? I really think it's the addition of Derrick Henry. Now, originally, I think with Lamar, there wasn't too much. Like initially, I was like, okay, they got Derrick Henry to punch in these touchdowns, but Lamar only had 5 rushing touchdowns. I just think there's going to be more of an emphasis on running the football with Derrick Henry. There's a reason they brought him in. He's at the very tail end of his prime that you could say he's going to be there in the goal line situation. Derrick Henry's a goal line back, a big third down back. And the reason why he didn't have success in Tennessee was because the offensive line was terrible. Now he goes into one of the best offensive lines there in Baltimore. He's the guy that's going to take all the hits, not all the hits, but a lot of the hits, which kind of shies away from Lamar having to do everything to kind of preserve him a little bit. And I think Lamar's rushing yards are going to drop a little bit from maybe 800 to like 600 ish, which is going to get you lesser points, as well as keeping around that 5 touchdown, maybe even lower depending on where they're at. In the goal line, they might just hand it off to him 4 straight times. So I really think if Derrick Henry was not in the picture with the Ravens, now that they have a steady back, I would probably put Lamar at my number one. But just because Derrick Henry was brought in for a reason, and it's hard to do the same season back to back, even though Lamar is such a tip of the iceberg talent who won MVP and could easily be the number one fantasy quarterback by season's end. Okay, and then your number one.
Yeah, so I have Lamar as my number one. I still think he could go back to back on MVPs. I think that he could honestly have even better season with Derrick Henry. I know you mentioned that his rushing touchdowns never had many. I think he's going to stay right around that 5 to 7 range. I think is very doable for him. But I honestly think there's a chance his yards could go up. I know it kind of does make sense with Derrick Henry there, like when his yards go down. But last year, Gus Edwards and Keaton Mitchell, they were just feeding him the ball, and now they don't have either of those guys. It's really only Derrick Henry back there. So instead of giving it to multiple people, Derrick Henry's just going to have all of those. And I think that opens up that rushing lanes for Lamar because people are going to have to pay so much more attention in those play action plays or read options on Derrick Henry out of the backfield. Before with Gus Edwards and Keaton Mitchell, he didn't really have to do that because it's not a name like Derrick Henry. But now they have to, and that's going to open up more chances for Lamar to keep the ball and have a one-on-one with a linebacker off the outside. And I'm probably going to take the odds that Lamar's going to break that tackle or just run right past that linebacker. And one of the things with Lamar, he had a career high in passing yards last year at almost 3,700. I don't think he's going to do that again. I think right around 3,400, 3,200 is a very doable mark for him. But his touchdowns were down. If you look at his other MVP year, he had 36. Last year, only 24. He had also a year of 26. I think his passing touchdown could go up a little bit here, or I wouldn't be too surprised if it honestly stayed at 24, but there's a chance it could go up. Mark Andrews coming back. He missed a good chunk of last year with an injury. And also, the big thing with interceptions, he brought down his interceptions. He's now back-to-back years with 7. But 2 years ago, he did through 7 in 12 games. Last year, he threw 7 in 16 games. If he's able to limit those turnovers through the air, I get it. Lamar's going to fumble. He's had a kind of fumbling problem throughout his entire career, kind of being more of that elusive, smaller quarterback who likes to run, and he also runs with the ball not really protected once he gets out of the pocket. it's going to happen. But if he's able to limit the turnovers like he did last year through the air, that was a big thing because you can't really be a quarterback with a fumbling problem and a quarterback with an interception problem. So if he's able to limit those, his passing stats may go down a little bit, but I think his rushing stats honestly could have a better chance of going up because of how much attention Derrick Henry's going to have.
So my number one is going to be Josh Allen. Look, I mean, like I said, it's really up to debate about whether it's Allen or Lamar Jackson. I think for a lot of people, for me, I got to go with Josh Allen. I think he's the best fantasy quarterback in this entire fantasy football upcoming season. Last year, 4,300, 29 to 18. Obviously, 18 interceptions was a little bit high with only 29 touchdowns, but he made up for it rushing the football, 524 yards and 15 rushing touchdowns. So I think he'll get to 15 rushing touchdowns. I don't know, probably not, but he's shown the capabilities to do so. I know a lot of people are saying, "Oh, losing Stephon Diggs, that's going to hurt him," and it probably will to an extent. But maybe it opens up Josh Allen's ability to pass the ball. I mean, they had a great relationship. It kind of soured, actually, really soured the last year, and that can be a distraction. Now, honestly, Stephon Diggs is a great receiver, but you bring in another great receiver in Keon Coleman. You got Khalil Shakir and Curtis Samuel, who aren't big names now, but I really think will be big names down the line, especially after the season. And you got the two tight ends in Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox. So you lose Stephon Diggs, sure, but you have tons of options that you can throw the ball to. These are guys besides Samuel, really that have kind of established a connection with Josh Allen. And I think this just opens up Josh Allen to be more free. It kind of creates less animosity between the offense as a whole. I think it's a win-win situation. I think Allen definitely gets at least 10 rushing touchdowns because that's where he thrives in the fantasy football context. And I think now that he's going to be more free and not having to really throw the football to Stephon Diggs, where a lot of his interceptions came from, he's going to drop those interception numbers, maybe up the touchdown numbers a little bit, and keep the passing yards. So that's a really good combination. He finished inside 1 point by Jalen Hurts as far as average fantasy points last year, but still finished as the number one fantasy quarterback. So I think there's a lot of things to be excited about with Josh Allen, but any of these top name quarterbacks, I think you got to be happy about if you're able to snag. Well, thank you guys for listening to another episode here in The Truth. Like I said, if you guys wanted the full rankings, and I mean full rankings, make sure you subscribe to The Truth for $2.99 a month. The link is in the description. You'll get the full fantasy football rankings for the upcoming season. If you guys did enjoy it, make sure you follow The Truth on Twitter at The Truth as one to stay up to date with the latest information regarding The Truth, including podcast dates, podcast uploads, and other important information you don't want to miss. Make sure you guys also follow The Truth on Instagram and TikTok at the.tt.truth. Are looking to find a drink that offers peak hydration, raises your energy levels, speeds up your recovery, and keeps your mind sharp to focus and memory? Look no further than Acid Rainwater. I'm excited to partner with Bloodline Sports AZ and Acid Rainwater, which focuses on peak hydration and productivity, while also maintaining ecosystem-friendly product. Use code HESSON15, that's HESSON15 for 15% off every purchase. As always, I'm your host, the one you love the most, Nile Hesson, joined once again by AJ Ponciano. Take care and good night.